Welcome back to pointkarting.com and our chassis build for the DR Mini 18. And today we're going to put on the side pods and the side pod Nerf bars. Having your Nerf bars in place properly and securely is crucial to make sure that everything's going to work well on your go-kart, and both the driver driving the go-kart you're driving on track as well as other competitors are going to be safe, and that everything is within regulation so that you can go compete and be safe on the racetrack and not get a penalty. The first step when installing your side pod Nerf bars is to remove the pre-installed bolts that are going to help hold on the side pod Nerf bar. These on the DR Mini 18 come pre-installed when you unload the chassis from the box from DR Kart North America, and you need two 10mm wrenches to take them off. Now we have our side pod Nerf bar. Now I'm going to insert it in the bars. On this chassis, things fit very nicely and it goes together very smoothly. However, some chassis, sometimes the distance between the two Nerf bar fittings on the chassis versus the actual straightness of this bent bar can be different, in which case set it in the longer of the two chassis tubes and bend the other Nerf bar into place as you push it in. In this case, we can see that it fits fairly nicely. Now, once it's in position, we don't necessarily know that the Nerf bar is all the way in, and we want to make sure the Nerf bar itself, the rails, are as far all the way in to the chassis as far as possible to make sure that when we drill our holes that everything's going to fit nicely and our bodywork is going to be as even and uniform as intended by the chassis manufacturer. In the case of the DR, we'll take a small rubber mallet and we'll pound it in just a little bit further to make sure that when we mark our holes that everything is exactly where it needs to be. So I'm going to grab my rubber mallet, hold the bar in the center, and just lightly tap the bar in just a little bit further. Once it changes tone, you know that you're all the way in, and you can move to the rear side and repeat the same. Typically, the one with the longer frame tube is the one that you're going to need to pound it all the way into position. And now I have my Nerf bar as far in as I can go, and it's nice and straight in the chassis, so it's positioned well. Here I have my ball peen hammer. If you don't have one like this, a rubber mallet or even a normal framing hammer will work. And I've got a selection of punches. You can get these at your local hardware store. Again, not necessary, but especially if you're using a cordless drill, if you don't have a drill press at your disposal, this is going to make your job a lot easier, because with the round bar, trying to keep the drill bit centered, especially if it's even just slightly dull, is a bit of a chore, and you'll be really thankful you did this if you haven't done it before. Center it on the Nerf bar where you think you need it. Take your hammer, make sure your fingers are clear, and give it a nice solid wrap. About 2 or 3 good hits, and you've got a nice clean hole, or at least a start to center your drill bit when you go to drill through the Nerf bar to drill your holes. Now repeat the process on the reverse side, closest to the engine. And now I've got marks on both. The next step is to take your drill bar over to the drill press and get drilling. And I've got my drill bit. I selected a drill bit slightly larger than the M6 bolt that I'm going to put through these Nerf bars, just so that if there's any slight misalignment in the top hole or the bottom hole as I drill through this round stock, it's not going to be a major issue. After I'm done drilling it on the drill press, I'm going to take it over to my bench grinder here and use the wire wheel to just clean up any burrs. If you don't have a drill press or a bench grinder at your disposal, no worries. You can go ahead and use a cordless drill. Just know it might be a little bit more of a task, and you really want to make sure you have the chassis stable before you start drilling either into the tubes or into the side pod Nerf bar. So for those of you that have a drill press, I'm going to assume that most people in karting know how to utilize one. And I won't go too in depth, but one thing I would suggest is if you can find a supporting chuck kind of like this one, and maybe a towel to wrap around your actual Nerf bar, go ahead and insert it in there if at all possible, with the towel wrapped around it, obviously being careful to not turn the thing on until you do so and have it all positioned. And then we'll spray a WD-40, assuming you have something that's going to work well, or power foam is a good lubricator in this case. And now we're ready to drill. So the key with the drill press is to go steady, go even. You don't have to do anything too crazy. Just take your time and let the drill do the work. In this case, I might actually raise my level just a little bit because the drill press or the drill bit is actually fairly short. Find your hole. You get drilling. As you get close to the end, make sure to back off just a little bit so that it drills nice and even through and it doesn't grab. So there you have it. One finished hole through our Nerf bar. Now I'm going to take my side pod Nerf bar. I'm going to put it on the wire wheel and just take off some of those little burrs that you can see there. Again, if you don't have a wire wheel, you can use a file or anything like that, but you can see how much that just cleans that up so it looks just perfect. Same thing on the other side. There you can see, nice and clean. So that's really all there is to it when you're drilling these holes. If you prepare everything, then it goes really well. If you don't, then things can get a little bit tricky. Okay, now we've drilled our holes, we've put the side pod Nerf bar back in, and now it's time to go ahead and bolt it into place. So, take your bolts. It's important to put them in from the bottom side, would be my recommendation. Just shake the Nerf bar, and at times with new bolts, sometimes you may have to thread them in. If the holes that you drilled are slightly too tight. But once you have these in, it's important to tighten them down, but don't have them really, really, really tight, because if you tighten them too much, sometimes you can actually crimp down on the supporting bar itself on the chassis, and then it's going to be a lot harder to get the Nerf bar back in and out of the frame. So that's one little quick tip for people when they're first installing their Nerf bars. So take your 10mm and get both the top bolts and the rear bolt tight, and now you have a Nerf bar installed on your go-kart. Alright, Nerf bar is installed, and now it's time to install our plastic side pod. This is the KG MK14 plastic side pod. It's injection molded plastic, basically one single piece, and it has some pre-drilled holes in the bottom of it, and is designed to fit over the KG MK14 Nerf bar, the metal Nerf bar. And they both fit together by the use of these M8 conical head Allen bolts that use a 5mm Allen and a 13mm nut on the bottom. It's very important that when you go to fit this over, that you make sure that the bolt holes are lined up before you tighten it down. These metal tabs here are what is going to allow us to fit the plastic side pod actually to the Nerf bar. So first step is fit it over the metal Nerf bar, and everything fits together really nicely. Kind of hold it with one hand in position so that you can see through the metal tab, and then insert bolts, press through. Get these both kind of finger tight before really starting to crank it down, because there is one last crucial component here, which is, if you watch on the video, you can see that I can actually slide the side pod forward and back just ever so slightly. And if we look on the far side here, we can see there's actually a tapered area on the side pod where it fits over the Nerf bar. It's important that we get that position just so that as we clamp it down, it really clamps down on the flat area of the side pod, so that we're really getting the maximum area on the Nerf bar, so that everything fits together and it doesn't start to drift side to side or try to work itself loose. Once that's taken care of, then go ahead and take your 5mm Allen and your 13mm wrench and begin to tighten it down. And again, hold it in position as you tighten it down. And there you have it. One plastic side pod and the Nerf bar to match it installed on the DR Mini 18. All these components and a whole lot more are available now on pointkarting.com.